Good morning. My name is Yuli Bayraktari, and I'm the Executive Director of the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence, or NSCAI. It is my pleasure to welcome you to the third and final day of the National Security AI Conference and Expo. I'd like to start by thanking General Carlyle and the NDIA team for their tireless work over the past year to make this event possible. I also want to personally thank my friend Shane Shainman from Carnegie Mellon and NDIA's Senior Fellow for AI for being our #1 supporter since the very beginning. Holding an AI Expo and conference of this scale, which has never been done before, was a bold idea from the start. It takes an exceptional partner to agree to make an event like this happen, especially when it started as only as a single slide on a piece of paper. General Carlyle, Shane, and the entire NDIA team have gone above and beyond and have been world-class partners to us. NDIA overcame the challenges of COVID and found a way to hold this event virtually. That is the spirit our nation needs at every level to remain competitive in AI. AI is too critical for us to delay the pace of innovation in this competition. General Carlyle and Shane, on behalf of the full commission, thank you for believing in this idea, making it a reality, and carrying forward the spirit of our recommendations even after commission ends. We are truly grateful for everything you have done for the commission and for the nation. Over the past 2 days of sessions, many of you have engaged with representatives across government, industry, civil society, and academia. Although today is the final day of this conference and expo, we hope that this is the beginning of many partnerships and AI solutions. Please take the knowledge and relationship you have gathered here and seize the role you can play in keeping the United States competitive in space. We say in our report that AI requires a 4-part technology stack: hardware, algorithms, data, and talent. You are the talent we need to lead the AI competition. Today, during NSCAI's co-located conference, we will continue the excellent discussions of the past 2 days by focusing on the Commission's final report and how to implement it. Over the next few hours, you will hear from our distinguished panel, followed by keynote remarks from our chair, Dr. Eric Schmidt. We look forward to answering your questions and continuing to work together. I would also lastly like to thank my colleague, Kevin McGinnis, who has been a bedrock in taking this initiative from an idea to reality. Before I turn it over to Chris, I want to thank Kevin again, and now I'll turn it over to Chris Kirchhoff, my good old friend, Senior Fellow at Schmidt's Futures, who will moderate our first panel featuring the Honorable Katharina McFarland, NSCAI Commissioner, and Dr. Stephen Walker. Again, thank you all for joining today and for all your support over the past 2 years, and we look forward to continuing to work together to implement our Commission's final report.
Thank you so much, Yuli, for that introduction, and good morning to everyone. It is an honor to moderate today's opening panel. We're going to focus in today on the NSCAI report. For those of you who have read it, it's 754 pages. There will be a pop quiz, and any answers you get wrong, you'll receive a $50 fine in the mail, so pay attention. I am delighted today to introduce 2 exceptional people for today's discussion. First, the Honorable Katrina McFarland, and second, the Honorable Stephen Walker. I had the privilege of working closely with both when I served as one of the founding partners of Defense Innovation Unit Experimental in 2016 and 2017. Katrina is not only an NCAI commissioner, but she, there we go, camera on, much better. Katrina is not only a commissioner on the NSCAI, but she is, I think, we can all acknowledge a serial disruptor in acquisition. She started her education in applied sciences at Queen's University. She was the director of acquisition after that at the Missile Defense Agency, president of Defense Acquisition University, and ultimately acting assistant secretary of the Army for acquisitions, logistics, and technology from 2016 to 2017, which was a very fertile time in the Army that gave rise to many of the initiatives and innovation the Army is now scaling. On the commission, Katrina focused most of her work on Line of Effort 2, all about applying AI, which lands in chapters 2 and 3 of the final report. Dr. Walker is known widely in the department as a stalwart force for innovation. His career has spanned both the public and the private sectors. He has a bachelor's and PhD in aerospace engineering from the University of Notre Dame. He served as Deputy Assistant Secretary for the Air Force for Science, Technology, and Engineering, DARPA's Deputy Director, and then Director of DARPA from January 2017 to January 2020, where he launched DARPA's $2 billion AI Next program, which we'll talk a little about today. He now serves as Vice President and Chief Technology Officer of Lockheed Martin Corporation and was recently elected a member of the National Academy of Engineering. So welcome, Steve. Welcome, Katrina. Before we get to the meat of the report, I would love to begin with your own personal perspectives on where we are today. You have each been around the department and around technology for over 30 years. Steve, you spent some of your graduate education in Dayton, Ohio, home of the Wright brothers. You have each seen multiple waves of innovation hit the department in different ways. And I would love to hear each of you share with us, what was it for you? What was the aha moment where you realized that AI might be even more transformational than earlier waves of innovation?
Katrina, over to you. I'll let you go first.
Well, candidly, when I started working in the government back in 1986, I had just left the NASA space shuttle program called the Getaway Special. And in there, they were dealing with algorithms to help launch and manage science projects that were in space and not having to use manned support for those science projects. And at that time was when I saw the power of enabling humans come to light, to be able to do things beyond human capacity. But my career, as I worked with Marines and then had the exposure inside of a broader community at the Missile Defense Agency, et cetera, was pretty much burdened in the government compared to other areas that I was able to work with. The problem that I saw was I could see technology, but I couldn't bring it to bear inside the government. And when I really got excited about was when I started seeing and having access to more information about the threat and what other countries that don't share our values do with the application of artificial intelligence, the way they use it, embrace it, et cetera. So the whole career, frankly, and how fast it's accelerated and how commonplace it is. People don't realize it anymore, but yet there is this odd fear of it. I think as a nation, we don't recognize our ability to do what we need to protect it and to use it the way we believe in it. So I think I couldn't point to a specific place, but I would say right now is really timely for us to really get engaged. And I'll turn it over to Steve.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And Chris, I love the way you kind of phrased the question, wave of innovation, wave after wave. And, for me, I would say it wasn't a seminal demonstration of AI in the field, although, a lot of folks point to DeepMind's victory in AlphaGo as kind of an awakening of what machine learning can do for applications. But for me, I'm not a computer scientist, not an AI expert, so I'm an aerospace engineer, as you pointed out. So for me, what convinced me that there was really something here was my director of information innovation at DARPA at the time, John Launchbury. John was able to communicate to me, and really kind of explain to me the evolution of AI development over 60 plus years, frankly. DARPA got involved in AI, 1959, 1960, I believe. So, and he was able to communicate it. So you said waves of innovation, and John, if you go on the DARPA website now, I think there's a video still about John communicating the 3 waves of AI. The first wave being kind of a rules-based if-then statements approach. You can think of TurboTax as a great example. Second wave being the machine learning that we know today, the statistics-based AI, and a great example of that is DeepMind and winning AlphaGo, but also Siri, right? Natural language processing, and which, by the way, Siri came from a DARPA program called Program Assist That Learn. So then there's this third wave, right, that we're sort of just in the beginning stages of, which is, can machines really have common sense? Can they understand how to reason in context? And that's what the AI Next program was all about, that we started at DARPA, kind of trying to dip our toe into that water, see if we can make progress there. So I guess what convinced me was seeing this tech development and seeing the progression of AI and machine learning over the years and where we were headed more than any external event.
So, Stephen, following up on that, one question I have for you both, again, having been at this for a while, AI is a very different technology than, for instance, some of the stunning advances in aeroscience that we witnessed and taken advantage in the Air Force and other places. You've each, worked both in the trenches and also at the helm of some of the most important organizations in the Department of Defense for modernizing technology for the warfighter. As you each began to see the potential of AI accumulate, what was your intuition about what challenges this might pose to the department in terms of adopting AI at a broad scale? Why don't we start with you, Katrina?
Well, when I was the Assistant Secretary of Defense for Acquisition, which gave me insight into all domains of acquisition, both the intelligence community and the department's services and agencies, the biggest impediment that I saw was the lack of understanding and the system itself, not the practice, i.e. building it wasn't the problem, it was the adoption and adaption inside of our problem set of issues where we have built based on commodities dating back to the post-World War II era on how we get systems into the system, our system, the department system. So the budgetary system, the contracting process, the multitudes of people who have to check in to approve what you're doing, no matter what level of intellect you might have. And those things are very, very problematic. And then you have to complement it with what we actually had in our report, which is a lack of top-down leadership and training, i.e. people who have the skills to understand how to use an enabler. This concept of artificial intelligence, if we really grasp what Steve just was talking about, is there are forms of how you expand human capacity. What we do is we take what we want done and put it in another medium. We put it into computers predominantly right now, but we've seen, and you'll see it in the report, biology, chemistry, material science, energetics, that we transfer something we want to do into another medium. And the challenge is that people don't think of it in terms of a product into itself because it's so ubiquitous, it's everywhere. And so with not a knowledge of how to expand what we can do and how we can expand and transfer things from one plane, whether it's human or a machine, into another plane and protect what we want it to do and how we want it to do, has caused us to slow down. We're risk averse by nature, which is good. We want to be safe, and that differentiates us from some of our adversaries. But we want to have it in a form that expands and improves human life. Take things in the medical field that this technology has provided for us. And I'll just take one snapshot because it's personal and close to home. Cancer research, cancer identification. People are always damning facial recognition technology, and yet they don't understand that it's so adaptable because of its dual use purpose as an enabler. In the realm of cancer research and diagnosis, it's been saving lives, multiple lives. But because it's dual purpose and can be used in other domains, people are immediately adverse to it. We're more intelligent than that. And we have had, I think, a dialogue in the open medium that we have that has been influenced by people who don't want us to advance quickly. And because of that, we've created an imposition, a blindness in our own innovation skills and our own trust of ourselves and confidence. And so when I think about adapting it into our nation and into our federal government, because this is a whole nation issue. It's not defense only. It's federal government, economy, voting, finance, all the domains that keep our country stable. We have to adopt this and think of how other countries can use this to undermine our stability. And adopting it requires people to have an understanding, remove bureaucratic, risk-averse processes, think in terms of how they can contribute in terms of industry, understand that threat, adapt towards how they can contribute, help us improve our systems. It's great to have Steve here because he's on both sides. I'm now out of the government and can see some of that as well. I'm going to leave it there because Steve can add more. And unfortunately, I'm so passionate about this, I could probably talk for an hour on my own. So I'll stop.
So Steve, you in running DARPA, helmed one of the parts of the Defense Department that is in some sense supposed to be unsafe, supposed to be disruptive, supposed to be deliberately leaning forward, which makes you an expert in how to get the broader department to adopt some of the advances that DARPA has had the good fortune to hit upon. So what has been your perspective, your broad perspective on AI and where we're at right now?
Well, thanks, Chris. I don't worry at all that we're not going to innovate in AI and machine learning. That's been DARPA's job. We've got a fantastic ecosystem in this country to do innovation and creation. From universities to the DARPAs of the world, labs, and industry. If you really want to scale AI, though, you got to take it out of the science bin and make it an engineering discipline. And that's the part that I think everyone's struggling with. Industry, DoD. How do you make this a real engineering discipline? When I was at DARPA, we talked a lot to the Jake about the Joint AI Center for DoD. We talked a lot about this, and trying to hold them up as the center in DoD where this engineering discipline for AI could be developed, right? And so I think that would be an excellent role for them. And because I've been out of government now for a year and a half, I'm not sure where they stand on that. But things like an ML ops pipeline, how do you manage all the data you're going to have to manage? What are some common libraries that non-computer science people like me can put together and manage the whole AI lifecycle in a system is going to be really important. Training, how do you train people like me? How do we manage our talent and get them into the right jobs? AI consulting for non-AI people. How do we do that across a company like Lockheed Martin or the government, quite frankly? And hardware. I was pleased to see the report actually talked about microelectronics and the hardware side of AI, because that's going to be incredibly important to actually turning this into something we can use in real systems and at the edge, right? And so there's all these pieces that need to be brought together to kind of develop this whole engineering life cycle for AI that I think we're still missing on the DoD side, at least when I was there, and at companies like Lockheed Martin. Now we're trying to change that here. We're building some capabilities within Lockheed, quite frankly, that will allow for this full life cycle for AI to happen, but it takes time.
Why don't we keep on this really interesting thread of cultural and organizational change as an underlying essential factor to bring AI into the operational force at scale? I would love to hear each of your thoughts on this question. Perhaps the most provocative and fundamental recommendation of the Commission is to ensure that the department has a path to become AI ready by 2025. 4 years from now, for a number of reasons, including the Commission's judgment of the geopolitical landscape and how fast some of our adversaries, particularly China, are advancing. What do you each, and Katrina, let's go back and start with you, see as the way? Do you see a path, an organizational and a cultural path for the department to be AI ready in 4 years?
So I will tell you that was one of the biggest focus was to get the department ready. And in order to get the department ready, we had to pull every element of how you make change to the table. So that encompassed leadership, top down and bottoms up. Leadership being having a tri-chair steering committee for artificial intelligence that was co-chaired by the Vice Chief of Staff of requirements generation. You know, our very important piece of this is to get the warfighter to understand operationally how to implement AI, to have the USD R&E, Undersecretary of Defense for Research and Engineering, to be our science advisor at the table, to bring ODNI's intelligence, what we call the CTO, Chief Technology Officer, not quite like what Steve is, but close to it for a department, and essentially bring the community together to think about where and how an enabling science like artificial intelligence can create a differentiating opportunity to create that overmatch and protection and defense of our nation that we so desperately need in the Defense Department. But we also went one level higher, because this artificial intelligence problem is not just a kinetic problem. It's operating, and you'll hear about it. You probably witnessed it last week with what happened in Alaska with Xi Jinping talking about the United States in a very denigrating way. And if we don't have top-down leadership that takes a look at entirely how artificial intelligence can be implemented across our nation, we will not meet what is now a technology competitive world. And so we have a technology council, and the whole council is chaired by the vice president. This is a recommendation that's in debate on the Hill right now, that has the cabinet members sitting at this table to have a strategy, an integrated strategy on how to address the State Department, the Department of Commerce, all of the things that we care about in preserving our ability to have that edge. So now if you talk culture, top-down leadership helps speed up that cultural barrier. But we didn't just stop there. We knew that talent, to what Steve was talking, how do you educate people? We did some heavy lifts in this, had some fabulous people on the commission look at what a new, I call it an education renaissance. How do you talk broadly across the nation on raising up our level of awareness of artificial intelligence, providing credentialing as a different method. You know, you can build up your credentials to get to a degree, talking right out of high school or even inside of high school and elementary. How do you broaden their understanding and education? Building a military digital core. I mean, I can go on to education, but it was a focus. And then introducing this technology to war games for the defense specific areas, bringing industry and warfighters together to look at how, with a roadmap tied to the National Defense Strategy, how do we bring in that powerful skill and capability to bear. And then we talked about initial investments that they could make to start readiness. We have to have test and evaluation tools. How do you get ready? Well, you have to have the ability to define confidence. How do you unburden risk fearness? You create confidence. It's a mitigating strategy. The way you do that is accelerate how you get people to use it through pilots, through operational demonstrations, through integrating it into our plan and introducing it to low-risk areas like sustainment, business systems, so that you start to develop simultaneously with all these different branches. And I'm not going to go into a whole depth of the report, but I'm sort of showing you some areas that you probably will get the feel that it wasn't just go buy this. It was, how do you buy it? How do you educate people to understand it? How do you implement it in a parallel fashion, so you don't just try with one single thread, you try multiple threads, and having leadership at the other end, driving in priorities, driving in a strategy that includes resources and planning associated with it.
So Katrina, I think your remarks just now illustrated two very unique features of the commission report. One is just the intricacy of the recommendations, how thoughtful they are at layering all the needed approaches, but also their breadth and scope, because AI, as you mentioned, is something that doesn't just exist in one place. And I would love to hear Steve's thoughts. You know, the department will not be successful even if it succeeds in culture change, if its strongest industrial partners don't also succeed at the same transformation. So I would love to hear your thoughts of what Lockheed and other industrial partners need to be doing to make sure they're AI ready also by 2025.
Yeah, sure, Chris. I think, by the way, I need to say this before I forget, because I forget a lot of things these days, but I think the report was so well done, and the commissioners deserve a lot of credit. So Katrina, thank you for that. All the things I talked about before in making AI, going from a science to an engineering discipline, I think is really where industry can help the department. And we're doing that at Lockheed Martin. I'm sure our competitors are doing the same thing, because we're focused on, if the department really wants to fight across all domains, and we hear a lot about that today, joint all domain operations, and we have a strategy here at Lockheed Martin to help enable that. AI and machine learning are going to be critical to helping achieve and make that vision a reality. And so if you take a look across what fighting across all domain means and being prepared to do that, one example is in the battle management command and control area, something called JADC2 that's being talked about in the department. AI and machine learning is going to be absolutely critical to being able to fight at the speed of where future war is going, where it's headed. And so what we're doing, I can just tell you what we're doing here at Lockheed is we're setting up a Jake-like organization, a centralized organization within the company, reports to me, that's looking at how do we do all those engineering things that I talked about. Katrina mentioned test, and that's one that's often forgotten, but how do you verify and validate the AI is working properly and is going to do what you think it's going to do? That's a critical piece. But this central organization, much like the Jake, is focused on this machine learning ops pipeline that we're going to need here at Lockheed Martin to make sure we can train our non-computer scientists, the people working on the platforms, and how to get AI into those platforms, to do the engineering, to do the talent management, the people that we bring into the company, and make sure they progress into positions of influence to get AI across the finish line and apply to a lot of these systems that we're developing for DoD. And we're picking some problem areas, and battle management is one of them. So I think, and I'm convinced that you really need to kind of set up a Jake-like organization, a central repository of knowledge, and a place where these tools and techniques and engineering disciplines can evolve. And you don't want that, developed all over the country and all over the company in, multiple instantiations. You want it at one centralized place where people can go who aren't necessarily familiar with the field and learn, and then take that learning and apply it to their problem set, to their domain. And so we're certainly doing that here. In fact, I want to make a shameless plug that we are hiring AI and machine learning experts. So give me a call. But that's a way Lockheed Martin and other companies like us can help the department, and we're all in on this. And so it's going to take the whole community. The last thing I'll say is I do like the recommendations that most of the recommendations that the report made in terms of raising the level of leadership attention, right? So I thought the Technology Competitiveness Council at the White House level, that we need that not just for AI, we need it for a lot of technology areas. Think synthetic biology, think microelectronics. That actually needs to exist because technology is going to be so important to our national security and a whole host of areas moving forward.
Well, amen to that. And thanks too for that portrait of the significant muscle movements that Lockheed is making to get itself ready for what needs to be done. I'd love to pivot back to Katrina, because another very important focus of the commission was looking at the question of how the department can interact with small and medium-sized firms that are working on AI and other leading technologies. And Katrina is behind an incredibly thoughtful outreach through the Federal Register that solicited comments from businesses about what it's actually like to work with the department. And a number of recommendations came out of that I think were really quite useful and insightful. One of which was that many small firms don't themselves have the resources to have a fully classified SCIF set up. And so having a sort of WeWork style shared classified space would actually be a way to enable some of the most innovative small firms to work on some of the department's hardest problems. Katrina, can you share more about the Commission's thinking on the right way to get more startups and small firms involved in the AI fight?
So to me, this is so important because I think all of us recognize the innovation skills that come from this small community, right? To what we learned, I would offer a sort of set of things that were important, and we did a lot, to your point, of making recommendations aligned to them. So data authenticity and provenance is so important to us, and we need to get access to data to be able to design. And one of the challenges for small innovative businesses is getting access to data. I mean, we're not the Chinese government. We don't take information from all sources and create this huge data pool for different uses than what we would consider important and valuable and certainly within our value system. So what we thought was that we needed an access point, and that's the hoteling suite, like you said, for our smalls to come in and operate on. And in fact, I think it was yesterday or the day before, the JAIC actually stood up the first foundational element to do that, which is the Joint Common Foundation, the cloud-based enabler to assess and access for the department our data pools and bring people from smalls and large. We're bipartisan, to come in and work on these systems, to be able to do algorithm development, to be able to start looking at how to do it. And another step up is, of course, to get access to clearances without having a contract. One of the challenges we have for people to be able to work inside of certain systems that we definitely need improvements and changes on is to get people to be able to work in this environment. And then we took a whole host of tools. So we talked about tools, again, to undo some of the bureaucracy. Already there are tools that we have that we aren't using enough, how small businesses are protected against certain burdensome processes and review cycles. We have tools out there that are public-private ventures, other transaction authorities, using adaptive acquisition. There's a thing called contracting cone. I'll throw all these out as teasers. But the digital world now should be able to actually facilitate speed. If we have small businesses coming to the table, they should be able to access, develop, offer, and have a pipeline that is transparent to the traditional requirements generation before you get the budgetary assignment, then which you then do a contract, and then you compete and you just select, and then you're literally 4 years behind the current technology timeline, right? So we have put a lot of those recommendations into it, but we certainly have more to go. That is an area that I know personally we can do a lot of improvement on. So thank you, Steve, who came in.
So Steve, you as DARPA director helped launch a major AI program that targeted, of course, expertise from industry. And DARPA is really a standout in the department, as we all know, at having the agility to work not only with small firms, but with many academic researchers. What are your own views on the things that we need to do? And are there any recommendations from the report that you would particularly lift up in this area that maybe harness some of the lessons that DARPA has learned and take them a bit further?
Sure. Yeah. No, I think we focused AI Next on specifically trying to reach out to small companies that are extremely innovative and get things done quickly. I am proud to say Lockheed Martin has won some of those awards. It's important that we even Lockheed Martin plug into the small company ecosystem, right? And able to work with them. Katrina mentioned data, and that's something the small companies don't necessarily have, especially when it comes to platforms like the F-35, right? So one of the approaches we're taking as we look at what joint all-domain operations is going to require and the technologies that are going to be required to support that, AI, machine learning being a key one, is how can we work with the commercial sector more as Lockheed Martin, take advantage of what they know and understand about those technologies. In many cases, they're leading the way. And how do we work with them to enable a partnership that DoD can take advantage of, right? I mean, the Chinese do a wonderful job of linking their commercial companies with their national security infrastructure, right? We need to do a better job in this country. So, the one thing that small companies are attracted to in terms of working with a Lockheed Martin, say, is we have the data. We have the data associated with all the platforms across all domains that DoD cares about. And so in our case, we're building these partnerships and with large and small, actually, companies from the commercial world. We can provide them the data, the platform know-how, the scenarios that they need, the problem sets, really. And they provide us with a lot of innovation and software development capabilities at a fast pace. And so we're finding that these partnerships are incredibly important to us. I think they're incredibly important to the country, right? And how we position the best we have in industry and at universities in support of a national security mission. AI Next, I think I've been out of DARPA now for almost a year and a half, so I don't know. The program was only 6 to 9 months old when I left, so I don't know the track record, but I do know the focus was, get a BAA out the door every month and get contractors awarded in 60 days or less. And I think we were hitting that when I left. That's important to small companies, right? Turning that around quickly and letting them go execute. And so I think it's been an important program for AI, certainly.
So we're about to shift to audience Q&A here in our remaining 20 minutes or so together. But so those of you listening along, please put your questions to the chat, and we'll get through as many as we can. And if you don't, that pop quiz will start, and $50 fines in the mail. You don't want that, so please ask some questions. So Steve, you just talked about another seminal challenge and how the department and firms like Lockheed communicate their problem sets to industry. I'd love to pivot back to Katrina, because a number of the recommendations in the report were about new ways to share problem sets that get around older and different ways of doing things. So Katrina, why don't you share a little bit about the top lines of the Commission's perspective on how to do this better, particularly in AI?
So it flows from the top down. Again, the National Defense Strategy should have a classified annex that talks to the technology opportunities to fix the hurdles. But how do you get it out to the small, medium, large companies? There has to be a vehicle to do that, to your point, and Steve's. And Steve's had one, AI Next, but all of the services, thankfully, over the last few years have really accelerated their intent to create what I call vacuums for opportunity. And that's like AFWorks, NavWorks, RCO, which actually is a lot older than some people realize. And the other special type of organizations that are structured so that people can have a constant interaction. There's some pros and cons to this COVID, more cons than good, I'm sure. But one of the things that did advantage us is that there was a revolution in itself on how we use IT, such as this virtual forum. It gives more access to more people. I don't have a room that I have to figure how many people can I fit into it. The room is literally as many people as we want. And so this whole change has allowed us to introduce technology space much quicker in terms of problems. And so, again, going back to a conversation we had a few minutes ago, things like having a war game set up where people can come and display and actually engage in different forms of it, pilots, demonstrations, CRADAs, which is where you share a relationship with an industry partner on the investment in the opportunity, the common environment where people can come in and hotel and see problem sets, or even better, because the government isn't up to the awareness level we want it to be, we would like industry to show us where we can have better efficiencies and come in to demonstrate where you can get the synergies and the speed. Let's talk the analytical world, and both the IC and the government Computers, when we talk narrow artificial intelligence, which is the first part of what Steve had talked about, steps sort of waves 1, 2, and possibly 3, actually performs repeatedly better than humans in doing math. We tend to do errors. Why not take the burden of doing math and writing, Excel spreadsheets and building momentous briefs out of your head with, manual labor? Have computers take your mental energy that you put into doing this and provide you alternative courses of action. So to your point, we're exposing as much of this, as well as Jake as an accelerator is exposing opportunity space to industry, hence why I'm sure Lockheed with Steve are looking at how to create a similar pattern, because it's going to have to work that way.
Yeah.
One thing I'd put
Katrina,
on the table, go ahead.
You bring up a really important point that the communication has to be two-way, because in many areas we know that industry is the furthest ahead. So I'd love to hear Steve's thoughts on how at Lockheed you're trying to make sure your own communications with industry are in fact two ways.
You mean with government or industry?
Well, between the innovation happen at small firms, so that Lockheed can both share your own problem set, but also learn about things that you didn't even know about.
Right. That's good. Fortunately we have a new CEO, Jim Takelett, who came on board in June, I believe. And Jim is from the commercial sector. He ran a telecom company called American Tower very successfully. And the neat thing about this is Jim has lots of friends in the commercial sector, and so we've been meeting with many of them, and not only briefing them on where we want to go and what our problem sets are and what we want to apply AI and machine learning to, but also hearing from them and what their capabilities are, what data they have, and in fact we've built some partnerships already I'll just say in some areas where neither one of us has great data sets. We're gonna work with a commercial firm to generate the data synthetically, right? And to kind of provide that to both sides for what we need to do. And so the communication does go both ways. We can learn a lot from the commercial sector. As I often tell people here at Lockheed, if you look at the top 6 companies, these are large companies obviously, but the top 6 companies in the commercial world, you can think of many of them, Microsoft, Facebook, Google, they're investing $70 billion a year in internal research and development. That pales in comparison. That's huge compared to what defense companies are currently investing internally. And so it's not all us telling them, what the story is. We can learn a lot from them, and that's why we're so interested in building these partnerships with the commercial world.
So Steve, we've just had an audience question come in that's right on point, and it's from somebody who's tracking a number of AI firms, 20,000, the questioner said. And he asked the question of, hey, according to what we see, very few of these firms are actually working with the department on national security. Katrina, I know the AI Commission report talks a bit about this, and I know that the Commission has seen data that suggests, very few, for instance, of the top 100 commercial AI firms are working with the department. What letter grade would you give the department today on how it's doing on this front, and what letter grade do we need to get to if we're going to get to AI ready by 2025?
So I've been out of the government 4 years. I left the position of Assistant Secretary back in 2017. And I will offer to you, at that time, I would have said a D-. But I would say now, we're a C-. The only reason why I say that is that everybody's recognizing the challenge, and they're trying to find ways inside of the system to accelerate. And there are things that we can do to accelerate inside the system. But in all fairness to everyone that works there, the amount of activity that is going on to adapt and adapt is constrained. And part of it is financial and part of it is systematic. We talked about test and evaluation. We talked about contracting and acquisition and the requirements and the budgetary system. And those things really do have to be adjusted. And so we've put in place certain recommendations that thankfully got supported very well by Congress. We really enjoyed a very true bipartisan and uplifting support from Congress. But we need to go further. And in order to get small businesses into this domain, there has to be a learning on how to work with the government and how to work with big industry. So for example, if you're small, I've heard that you're concerned about being swallowed up by a large. Well, you can always create non-exclusivity agreements and work cross domains. Commoditize yourself. And when you come into the department, request those tools that allow you to work freer. What's amazing is that we don't push against the system from outside. We don't say, well, why can't I do it differently? We just accept because we're customer focused. We've been trained that way in industry to answer to what the government asks, challenge the government, come back in with alternatives.
So Katrina, if we were to play the exercise of giving you a bottle with a magic genie that appeared, and since this is the government, you don't get 3 wishes, you only get 2. What would your 2 wishes be for what you would have the Secretary of Defense say as he is in his first 6 months in office, setting an innovation agenda for the department? And what would you have the service secretaries themselves do to also accelerate AI in their opening 6 months in office?
So if I were Secretary Austin, I would have done something similar to what I've seen in the past, where you bring industry together with your senior leadership within the government and you state how you prioritize artificial intelligence and the enabling sciences in your plan, your campaign plan, and task the organization to respond and ask back from the service secretaries what their implementation plan to meet that would be. And then the second wish I'd have from the services is to get energized by understanding fully the threat. And what I mean by that, there was nothing more incentivizing to us as commissioners, recall that we're all doing this pro bono, than to understand, it took us a year, but to understand what our adversaries are doing in this space. If you understand that, you have motivation. I would like that to be extended to industry to the maximum extent practical, but there is nothing more incentivizing than to recognize how this can impact our view of what we want for a future.
Well, I think too that really speaks to the urgency of 2025, which I think is an incredible goalpost. That going back to Steve's comments of national strategy, that all of us must keep top of mind. Steve, a question just came in that you might well have a perspective on, and it's a question about the data and simulation environments that are needed to actually put AI and ML to work on military problem sets. And the questioner asked a little bit about the Joint Common Foundation, and then, of course, the JAG is beginning to stand up. And the question is, how many of these environments, do we need to create sort of for the government only? And then how many do we need to create with industry in mind so that we can make sure that industry has the same access to the, the raw data and the problem sets? How would you think about doing that with your private sector and, of course, DARPA perspective?
Yeah, that's a great question. I do think you need what the JAIC is trying to set up there, and maybe only certain folks see what's going on there. But I think if we really want to get small companies and large companies in the commercial side, working with Lockheed Martin and others on the defense side, we need to set up some common environments with those companies. And we're thinking along those lines. And to do that, there's lots of things you can do. And you probably saw this, Chris, when you were at DIUX. There's lots of things you can focus on that are kind of civilian, unclassified applications, right? And you can do that with the commercial world and you can develop technologies that then apply to more classified applications. And so I think more of that needs to happen so that you can plug in to the commercial world, especially the small company innovation, focus on, human disaster relief or, civilian applications that have a dual use application. And then the defense sector can take advantage of that technology development and apply it to DoD applications in that world. So I think there's a way to do that. We're thinking about how to do it and how we would work with others to do that.
So one of the stakes in the ground, of course, that we've mentioned that the commission did pound in very hard is this deadline of 2025. I would love to hear, Katrina, you mentioned how sobering it was for the commission to work through a fuller picture of what our adversaries are doing and what the implications of falling behind in AI could be. I'd love to hear in your mind, and then we'll ask the same question to Steve. What's at stake if we don't make that 2025 date? What will change? What do we risk?
Wow. I guess I'd characterize it in a statement that was made in the beginning of the report, and that is that essentially the stability of our nation and our technological position in the world, globally and locally, is at risk. So if you think about the future and you think about what we enjoy as citizens, our freedoms, our economic wealth, our strength and freedoms that you have, that you enjoy every day, they're all entwined in this future of artificial intelligence. And our value system with our like-minded international partners should be bound together to develop and protect what we consider the way we wish to live. And I'll leave it at that.
So that's a very powerful statement of a sort of invisible crisis playing out. That's not just about a particular technology, but it actually is about our way of life. Steve, I'd love to get your thoughts on the matter. And of course, DARPA plays the role often of being, not only a generator of path-breaking technology, but a canary in the coal mine to give the department a broader sense of strategic warning. If you agree with what Katrina just said, how would you think about communicating that sense of warning, not only to the department, but to the broader American public and the Congress?
I think 2025, and I wasn't part of the commission, so I don't know necessarily how the commission came up with 2025. Rather than focus on an exact date, I'd rather focus on the fact that I think it is imperative, AI and machine learning. This technology area is imperative. It's such an enabler for everything the department, I think, would want to do when they talk about joint all-domain operations. That if we really believe, and I do, that there's a pure competition going on right now, and this is a competition that the U.S. has generally led over the years. I think we're slipping there, and there's a lot of talk about why and who some of the peer adversaries might be. So rather than focus on the date, I just say we got to get started, and I think we've started, but we got to get serious about turning it into a real capability and applying it in lots of different ways. I mean, one of the things the report talked about is defending America, right, with this technology. And one of the key, it was highlighted to me when I read it, is defending against AI generated misinformation. At DARPA, we had programs, one of them was called Metaphor, where we were actually already working with the commercial sector to say, how can we use AI and machine learning to basically look at disinformation on the internet and prove that it was not true, right? And so, this is just one example, one small example of kind of a pure threat that's happening today, real time, and we got to make sure that we can decipher what's real and what's not on the internet, right? For the sake of our national security. And so it's just, I don't know if 2025 is the right date or not, but we gotta make progress, and we got to get started in a lot of these areas.
Well, Stephen, as a former strategic planner of the National Security Council, I can say that the word slipping from a former DARPA director is a very alarming adjective. Katrina, one of the questions that's just come in from the audience is, assuming 2025 is our stake in the ground, what are the boxes we have to check? How are we going to know that we're on track? How would you, as a commissioner, describe what members of the public and members of Congress should be looking for in the next 4 years?
Oh, thank you. So one of the things that I would want to know is that we have developed an acceptable risk profile. And what do I mean by that? That we have defined, and you'll have a whole section in the Commission's report, we have defined our ethics, principles, and our value system that we would measure ourselves to retain what we believe our value system to be. That we have built in our education and training, which includes people trying out and testing and validating how they want to impose artificial intelligence and use those enabling sciences that we talked about earlier. The next thing is how do I show internally differentiation between what was the system and what is the system that we're operating in? How does that relate to our new way of competition? The thing that you talked about right earlier was that it's a non-kinetic competition that we're in. I won't use the word war the way we used it in the past, because you can have a complete undermining of our value system, our ability to be stable, et cetera, non-kinetically. You don't have to have somebody take and hit the trade towers to have somebody no longer in charge. And so you'd want to have all of the branches of government engaged with industry, with the population, our entire population, to understand the value system and show how that is changed against what we have today. And we did a bit of that in our report, but at a global level, at our national center, to show how those steps are being progressed in.
Steve, what would you be looking for from industry for critical gates to hit, bringing more operational capacity online in the context of what Mike Brown earlier in this conference called a superpower marathon involving advanced technology?
What would I be looking at in terms of industry producing? Or?
Yeah, I mean, if you were to sort of look at the next 4 years, if you were to set goals in the same way that the Commission has, how many new operational systems that are bringing AI capabilities have not before been a part of the picture online? What are for you some of the near-term goals that you're trying to drive from Lockheed's perspective and from your own perspective?
I'd be looking at, are we applying AI and machine learning to improving our production capacity within Lockheed Martin, and we have some projects focused on that, and they're producing some really good results. But can we get more efficient at production by using AI and machine learning in our factories? I think we can, and we're actually showing some of that. I'd be looking at, can we? Katrina mentioned machines do things better than humans now. One area is interpreting images, right? And so that's low-hanging fruit for us and for others. Can you look at images and use AI and machine learning to understand what's in the image? I think in some cases, I think in a lot of cases, machines can do that now better than humans. So that's some low-hanging fruit. I mentioned battle management, this idea that you can use AI and machine learning to manage, could we use it to manage hundreds and thousands of platforms out there in a joint all-domain ops warfighting concept? I think the answer is we need to figure that out because that's where the world is headed, and that's going to be a longer-term thing, but I think it's probably one of the biggest applications for AI and machine learning from a defense standpoint. So we're focused on that, but more for the long term.
We have just 5 minutes left, and we've covered a tremendous amount of ground in the session together. We've had such active questions from our audience. There will be no need for a pop quiz on the 754-page report. We've talked about some of the top-line national leadership recommendations involving how the White House and perhaps the Vice President forming a technology council should provide top-down leadership for the nation. We've talked a bit about the very bottom up about how to give small firms the opportunity to work on military problems, both at the unclassified and the classified level. And we've talked a little bit too about the middle, about having institutions like JIAC that are drivers, not only in the department, but also at places like Lockheed Martin. In the closing couple minutes, and why don't we start with you, Steve, and then go to Katrina for the final word. What are some of the Commission's other insights and recommendations that you would want the audience to take home today as they pick up that wonderful report and begin to work their way through it? What are some of the things that you would really highlight for our audience?
Yeah, a couple things stuck out to me. I mentioned already the idea. I was expecting to read the report and think it was all about software, and the thing that popped out at me was this idea that, hey, hardware and microelectronics is going to be extremely important to the future of AI and machine learning and how we integrate it into our systems. And so, I really resonated with the recommendation to, I think the estimate in the report was $35 billion for an onshore production capability. I resonate with that wholeheartedly. And I think we've seen with COVID, it's important to have manufacturing in the United States. We have some of the best designers in the world still in microelectronics. We don't do a lot of our manufacturing here. So we need to fix that. And I think it's really important for AI and machine learning because you want that kind of computing at the edge in, say, unmanned systems to do AI calculations. We better be the best in the world at microelectronics, computing, and processing. The other thing that jumped out at me, which I'm not sure I agree with yet or not, but this idea of the National Technology Foundation. So I think it was in the report to kind of make the point that a lot of things fall off in this valley of death that people talk about, and I think it's a good thing to look at how to fix that across government and across our industry. I get worried a little bit when we're just creating another government organization. I think maybe trying to use the organizations we have and industry and universities, the ecosystem that I think is second to none. I think I understand why that recommendation's in there. And so that's one I think that's important to look at for lots of different reasons. And does that make sense, or what would it do? And actually, frankly, it popped out of me because DARPA plays that role in a lot of ways with industry. And so if you asked me what popped out at me, that was one of them.
Well, thanks. Well, Katrina, in just a couple minutes, we'd love to give you the last word, but I'd also commend to the audience for those who maybe haven't opened the 754-page report, a wonderful interactive section on the NSCAI's website where you can browse the report conclusions and recommendations in a really alluring format. So, Katrina, over to you for the last word.
Well, first of all, thank you very much for doing this, Chris, and to NDIA and to Steve for participating, and to all the community that's here. I just would like you to take away 4 pillars for action. The first one is leadership, top down, bottoms up, technology, competitive council, and having it led by the White House to show that DOD and the IC and all the other cabinet members are going to be integrated in understanding what this does to our nation. The second is talent. How do we grow it? Get those people in process, embrace it, don't fear it. We're a nation of innovation. We're risk takers historically. Let's do it. Third is hardware. Steve just talked about, beat that too heavily as a horse to ride, but we need to get that 110 miles, guys, 110 miles between us and our capability and someone from having it and not us having it. Fourth and last, innovation. We are the nation of innovation. Take and think about what you have in your value system. Build your ethics profile. as if you're a company, make a portfolio that describes your value system as a company or an agency. Do the same so that your employees, your people start to have confidence as a nation that we can do this right, which we can. And I'll leave it there.
Well, thank you for that very succinct closing set of remarks. Thank you both for participating today, for your service. Katrina, congratulations to you, the commissioners and the commission staff on a phenomenal report. We have gone from the Wright brothers to the shuttle program to a sense of the U.S. slipping in a really important geopolitical competition, and our way of life actually itself under more threat than many Americans realize. So thank you for joining us today, and I commend to everybody the tremendous report of the commission, which does lay out a very compelling roadmap that our nation needs to deeply consider as we move forward on AI and all of its implications. Enjoy your break now, and coming up after that, I believe, will be a keynote by Eric Schmidt.
Thank you. Thanks, Katrina.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye. Thanks, Steve.